I'm David Shapiro, and I'm the president of Alliance for PTSD Recovery. And we're very proud to uh, invite Razmik Sargsyan. Did I pronounce
Sargsyan.
Sargsyan? Razmik Sargsyan to tell his story, which is a very, very beautiful story. He's an Armenian who has who's both a lawyer and an expert in mass media, who's always reached out to help other people, and who is practiced the Transcendental Meditation program for a number of years. So we'd like to interview Razmik, talk to Razmik, and just find out about his life, what inspired him to learn TM, and find out so much more about it, about his whole motivation to help Armenia. So Razmik, welcome. It's wonderful to talk with you. Let's start out with your background. You're an Armenian, so tell us a little bit about your life in Armenia.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our conversation. Yeah, you're right. I was born in the south of Armenia, right after the first Nagorno-Karabakh war ended, which lasted from 1988 to 1994. And I lived in Armenia for most of my life, but I've also traveled, studied, and worked internationally. I went to law school in Armenia, and then I moved to Sweden to study international human rights law. And I continued living in Sweden for a few more years, and then kind of moved back and forth a few times, and ended up actually working and studying in Arizona, out of all places. I was a teaching assistant at Arizona State University, and I major in mass communication. So a lot of things just unfolded for me very organically, and I just happened to witness their value and became an advocate for them. And transcendental meditation is one of these examples.
So you tell us that you are a human rights advocate. You were a lawyer for a human rights advocate. Tell us a little bit more about this, because helping humanity is one of the most important things that we do. So tell us, when did this happen? What did you do, and what was the effect?
Yeah, well, so a lot of my career choices were motivated by how I thought I could contribute to other people, what tools were best for me at that stage. So I studied international human rights law in Sweden, and that's how my journey started. And I worked with a number of different human rights organizations: Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, Amnesty International. I worked with the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we carried out a number of reforms in Armenia and Eastern Europe in general. And the whole idea with that was to support organizations and groups that are acting and speaking for human rights, democracy, for reaching out to the marginalized groups and empowering them. So I've been involved in a number of different modalities. Some were more analytical, some were related to human rights law specifically, some related to international relations and diplomacy. But frankly, throughout all that process, so one of the other things that I do, I'm an executive coach, so I work with individuals and groups to help them maximize their personal and professional potential. And as I've been working with all these reforms, with all these organizations, one thing I've been contemplating was that what we've been doing is we were addressing the consequences of the problems. You know, a problem had already come up, and we were cleaning up the consequences. But I always thought we didn't go deep enough. We didn't touch the source of the problems, which we could discuss more about. Is, I think, is consciousness itself. It's our collective and individual level of consciousness from which we see what we see and then act. And I've grown very interested in alternative solutions to all these problems that we're speaking about. And transcendental meditation came to me through a very interesting person. It's just that person had a very interesting level of creativity, and I'm by nature I'm a very curious person, although a very skeptical person too. So I just asked him a lot of questions, and he told me about transcendental meditation. And then as I got to spend more time with other people that have been practicing TM, I just noticed something different about that. So that put me on a path. And now we're speaking about all the projects that we're doing, and we can speak about how TM contributes to a more collective development.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I think you've naturally gone from needing to help, wanting to help humanity, to wanting to improve the consciousness of humanity in order to, which is the fundamental unit of the fundamental quality at the basis of man's ability to act, is the level of consciousness, the purity of consciousness. So what are the challenges in Armenia that Armenia is facing, and how would refining the consciousness, or expanding the consciousness, or purifying the consciousness, improve the situation with war, the situation with that's probably the main one, but any other areas that you feel to talk about in Armenia, since you lived there much of your life?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's very important, and I love what you just pointed to. Even Gurdjieff, a lot of your listeners may be familiar, was a famous spiritual teacher with an Armenian origin, actually. He had this beautiful saying: the only prison you cannot escape is the one you don't see. You know, the prison of your thoughts, at a level that is perhaps not manifested. So that's what we were pointing about. And you're right to point to the challenges in Armenia. A lot of people don't imagine just how much Armenia, and I would say Eastern Europe in general, has gone through for the last 45 years. A tumultuous, sudden shift from socialism to capitalism after the USSR collapsed, and a lot of things came out of that. An earthquake in 1988 that took away about 30,000 lives, according to different calculations. Armed conflicts, major armed conflicts. The first Nagorno-Karabakh war is an example, lasting from 1988 to 1994. Even Armenia's prime minister and the speaker were assassinated in 1999 inside the parliament. So just to point to just how much has happened there. There's never a boring day in Armenia. You name it, we've seen it. And in 2020, there was another war during the pandemic. And according to different calculations, all these wars in the region from all different sides took away 50,000 human lives, if not more. And what's important here is to realize that one way to put it would be there's a collective consciousness in Eastern Europe. There are a lot of variables included. There are geopolitical interests, military aspects. What we're seeing right now in Ukraine, it didn't just start in one day. There were other conflicts. There were similar things happening within Ukraine, around Ukraine. So all these, I think that all of that is interconnected, and what we're witnessing is just a side effect of how low our global level of consciousness is. What we have to realize is that unless we're all happy and at peace, nobody's at peace. And you can see with mass migration that even if you live far away from all these areas where there's a conflict or anything, it's a butterfly effect. It influences everyone. And Armenia is right now, once again, is a crossroad between a lot of different geopolitical interests, economic interests, and so forth. So over the years, Armenia has been trying to use different solutions. And Transcendental Meditation was originally imported to Armenia in 1989. They actually have a podcast episode about that. And 30,000 people learned TM. And you can speak more about this because this is your area of expertise, but essentially there was a major PTSD. There still is a major PTSD within the country. I mean, just the videos that we have seen, the war crimes that have been talked about, a mother loses her child in war, and then that pain keeps on circulating. So Transcendental Meditation, after the earthquake of 1988, was extremely helpful in overcoming that PTSD. And one thing I want to add, in spite of all these things that I've mentioned, Armenia has actually emerged as an island of democracy with a really high rate of economic turnout. And I think that this has to do with the fact that collectively we're starting to develop a resilience, some sort of a capacity to transmute all that pain, all these challenges into something brand new, because there is no alternative to that. I don't think there's any alternative to that anywhere, but sometimes when things are getting a little bit more chaotic, it almost forces you to take that approach. And transcendental meditation has served as such a tool in terms of PTSD recovery to begin with, but it just happens that TM does much more than alleviate stress and go beyond stress. It actually puts you on a big learning curve, and you're able to process a lot of variables at the same time, make better decisions, focus better. So all these people that have learned TM not only became stress-free, but they actually became active citizens, productive citizens. And I have to be, and again, I'm speaking about TM properly understood and practiced, which is why we're working together to provide more education on transcendental meditation to different groups of people in Armenia, both individuals and groups who might be able to practice it together. But I'll pause here now and let you add to that.
No, I think you've made very beautiful points that to purify the individual, purify the conscious of the individual is possible. There are technologies like transcendental meditation, and transcendental meditation can also purify the whole society when enough people meditate individually or together. So that's really the specialty of TM, and it gives the possibility for not only some individuals to be more creative in Armenia and the region, but the whole society as a whole to be more creative. And there's something called the square root of 1% effect, or the Maharishi effect, named after the founder of Transcendental Meditation, which is there are over 35 studies published in peer-reviewed journals that show when the square root of 1% of the population practice TM in the advanced program, called the City program, TM City program, together in one place, then there's a very large increase in positive indicators, which means better economics for the whole country or for the whole region. Square root of 1% of Armenia is only 200 people. And so if 200 people were to meditate and do the advanced program together twice a day, there would be a measurable increase, according to these studies that have been, I said, 35 studies published in peer-reviewed journals. There would be a measurable increase in economic well-being, in progress. There would be a decrease in the negative indicators of hospital admissions, violent crimes, and other such negative indicators quickly in the country, and those would be sustained as long as that group of people were regular in their meditation. So there's the cutting edge technology now, the gold standard technology for improving the country and actually helping prevent war and violence. Because if you're is transcendental meditation. There have been studies done in war zones, and there's a dramatic reduction in violence and war when there's a significantly large group available in the region. So transcendental meditation would be not only a technology to improve economics, to reduce and prevent stress and post-traumatic stress disorder, but it would also reduce the cause of stress and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is war itself. It would dramatically reduce the possibilities and the strains of war in the nation. You've touched on actually quite a lot of points. So some other points you'd like to bring out about your current projects with helping the implement transcendental meditation in Armenia?
Yeah, and maybe let me comment on another thing that I think is super important, and then I'll speak about that. Well, in general, as I said, I'm a very skeptical person by nature. And when it comes to techniques, especially mental techniques designed to bring, let's say, freedom from stress or increase productivity, I've tried so many, and transcendental meditation is perhaps the only one that I've sustained because it didn't feel like I needed to put a lot of effort into that. in my paradigm of the world, what we have is we all have innate resilience. We all have innate health, and different traditions and languages point to it in different ways. And TM, in that sense, has been an exception for me because, well, it's the art of doing nothing, you know. So, and that's, and it might, when we're speaking about how there's research about, preventing what it seems like what these researchers were doing, they were looking at numbers of violent crimes and incidents and this kind of things. It might feel kind of unbelievable, but I think it makes perfect sense because we're all experiencing life through our own prism of thinking. And depending on how much stress we've experienced, how clogged our thinking is, if my glasses are filled with mud, I'm not going to see reality as it is. And then all my actions are going to come from that state of mind. So essentially, what we want to do is we want to collectively raise our level of understanding, is another way to put it. And this seems to have an immediate effect that we may not be able to notice. Perhaps it's explained through quantum physics or anything like that, but it has a very practical uh, influence as well. And in this sense, in Armenia, we have already done a lot of work together. There's, in fact, I know that you've been in touch with the government. So there's a letter from the Minister of Health pointing out that the chief psychologist of Armenia has researched TM and recommends TM, and it has a positive effect on personal development. So that has been cleared out for us. What we're doing right now, we're trying to increase the awareness on transcendental meditation so that people who can afford it will get proper training and education, and people who cannot afford it can benefit from scholarship funds or other forms of financial aid. And it's especially important to bring TM to organizations and groups where people may be interested in practicing it together, because the research point, as you have mentioned, points to the fact that the effects are multiplied, and that's the n squared effect that you have mentioned. And it's interesting, the more people participate, the higher the, it's not just, if 2 people do it, it's not just twice more, it's 4 times more. And then if it's 3 people, it's 9 times more. So this is, it's a fascinating technology. And given the situation of Armenia, right now there are 120,000 Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh completely blocked, with no access to Armenia, with unstable gas supply. And this is all after the 2020 war, and there are shootings happening all the time. It's sometimes you come across situations when external interventions, although necessary, are not sufficient. And so, for example, right now there's an international Court of Justice decision about all the situation that I talked about, but we see that it doesn't work yet. So this type of a solution may seem alternative, but it might end up to be the ultimate solution. So what we're doing right now, we are raising awareness. We're working with the teachers. There are a number of teachers in Armenia. What's good about, I mentioned that 30,000 Armenians learned TM after 1988, and then some teachers stayed here. So that helped guarantee continued access to transcendental meditation. So essentially, our message for Armenia and for the world is transcendental meditation is an effective and scientifically researched tool that can help alleviate solve a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. And the state of Armenia, what happens in Armenia, is going to influence a lot of things. If a new armed conflict starts here, and together with what's happening in Ukraine right now, you can just imagine the effects of that on Europe, on Asia, on the whole world. So this is of paramount importance to everyone, not just the people that live here. And in fact, when people hear this, when you go to a group of people and you talk about transcendental meditation, and here's a teacher and here's an opportunity to learn, even before the benefits of TM start, just that sense of hope that, well, the world actually cares, I think it's extremely important. And I worked in diplomacy and political affairs for a long time, and I know that a lot of people are almost starting to give up that hope. And I think now is a great time to actually reverse it and bring a radical shift of consciousness. one that embraces coexistence and co-creation instead of, domination or anything like that.
I think these are really important points. And I think your point that there's if there's a growth of negativity or war or violence in the region, then that will affect, even in one country, that'll affect the whole region. And the opposite, and looking at it the other way, if we have a rise in peace and harmony and coherence, which is produced automatically, and as I said, measurably demonstrated in many published studies, then that will also have a spillover effect for the whole region, including this very dangerous situation in Ukraine. So not only will it help pacify the negative elements which are creating war and disharmony in Armenia and the Azerbaijan and that relationship, but if the group's large enough, it can spread and help pacify the situation in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia. So so we have a technology that's good for the individual, vast range of good benefits. 500 peer-reviewed studies have showed there are huge range of benefits for the mind, for the body, behavior, and even environmentally, as we've seen. And specifically, the Alliance for PTSD Recovery has been doing outreach with the TM teachers in Armenia, who we now have 5 Armenian TM teachers, and soon we'll have 9 available across the country to help. So we initially came in 2021, I believe, after the war, the most recent war with Azerbaijan. And there was a cry from the government, a call for the government, a cry from the government to help, and from psychologists all around the world. We responded to that and said, we'll be glad to help. And they said, we explained to them what TM is. We actually taught TM to the number of the top psychiatrists and psychologists. And then they wrote a letter, which we have, which says TM is good for, that Transcendental Meditation is good for mind and body. So the government, it's recognized by the government. We've presented to all the provincial governments who have supported. We've taught TM all around the country, and we've had this, and as there are 14 peer-reviewed studies on Transcendental Meditation and post-traumatic stress disorder alone, but they all show that TM is a very rapid, large positive benefit, mostly even within 30 days. So that's amazing for PTSD, because post-traumatic stress disorder itself can last years or can be chronic and last a lifetime. Person is trapped in they're reliving these experiences, the horrors of some experiences, and their nervous system can't get out of that loop. And with TM, we quickly settle down. You provide an option of inner peace, and that stress loop is no longer torturing the person from inside. So we're trying to bring not only that experience to the people who are in need, but we're also bringing it to the whole country to not only help reduce the stress in the country and the trauma in the country, but to prevent stress, trauma, and war. So we really appreciate your outreach to inspire both individuals with trauma to learn, people who can afford to learn. We want them to learn TM and to tell others, so that this wonderful new technology can be used by everyone. And also, of course, we want to form some groups of 200, 300, 400 or more who regularly do this TM in the advanced programs as a extremely advanced technology to prevent war, to create harmony with the nations, in the nation and between Armenia and other nations surrounding it. So what else? Would there some other points you'd like to add, Razmik? It's wonderful talking with you.
Yeah, no, I think we've discussed a lot of important topics, and I resonate a lot with what you just pointed to. Gostan Zaryan, who was an Armenian writer, used to describe Armenia as somewhere where West and East meet, but they don't collide. And it seems like the world is going into a collision. Their political powers, economic powers, and this conflict keeps on becoming more and more intense. And to be fully frank, I think that smaller nations get caught in the way and suffer even much more. And this is, it's an ugly situation, but also maybe this is an opportunity for us to really wake up to what we can do and what we should do. Because I bet a lot of our listeners are very much interested in spirituality, psychology, and all of that. But a genuine spiritual life is no longer kind of staying in ashram and meditating 24/7. It's being in the formless and the form at the same time. And you mentioned the TM advanced techniques. I think that's the beauty of TM, generally speaking. I think with access to inner stillness, you can also act informed from that state, and then your actions lead to beautiful consequences, not just for you, but also for other people. And the paradigm from which we're all discussing this is that wellness is what generates success. We've been thinking that, well, we have to achieve this and that so that we can finally be happy. But in essence, it's the other way around. So it's tapping into that inner peace, getting out with fresh insights, getting out with inspiration. And when it's done collectively, that's beautiful. I practiced TM with other people, and just the feeling of that is so ineffable. It's hard to describe it. It's just one of these things that until you try it, you can read the scientific research about it. The beauty of it is that you can look at the EEG graphs and see what happens to long-term meditators, or the brain coherence that is tracked when somebody's practicing, let's say, the TMCD program. But truly, it's the feeling of it is ineffable, and that's one of the things that gives me hope. And I want to thank everyone that has contributed to this. We're using whatever funding is available. We want to use it to bring education on TM, especially outside Yerevan, especially to the regions where people may actually have less likelihood to afford this, but actually need it even more. So we're working hard to have a balancing effect on this whole situation. And so there's that.
Thank you so much, Razmik. I just want to add that Transcendental Meditation is a effortless mental technique that's practiced by over 10 million people around the world. It's learned very quickly in a few steps, and then as soon as one's practicing it completely, and then what has a technique for life to refine, to improve the mind, the body behavior, and even the environment around one through one's own growing inner silence. So everyone's invited to learn, and we thank Razmik so much for all his help and for speaking with us today. Thanks again, Razmik.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, David.